Welcome to Mostly Politics. Today's guest is Joseph Sweeney, founder and CEO of the Asservo Project.
Hi, Joe. Welcome. The Asservo Project helps law enforcement to identify traffickers for children and young adults and provides information to facilitate, arrest, educate the public of trafficking dangers and assist in the recovery of victims.
For over 29 years, Mr. Sweeney has devoted himself to serving his country and community as a former SWAT operator, bomb squad commander, and U.S. government explosive security expert.
Few people realize how common and widespread human trafficking is, with few resources dedicated to arrest offenders and rescue victims. Joe formed Asservo in 2017, and their motto is Watch, Rescue, and Guard. So welcome, Joe, to the show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Joe, while serving overseas, you described sort of an awakening you had where you became aware of the size and the scope of the human trafficking problem. What can you say right now to help us kind of have a same sort of an awakening?
49 million people, it's estimated, that are sold into slavery every year, whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking, and it's grossing over $100 billion in criminal revenue raised. Imagine as a parent, you would wake up to a note from your 14 or 15-year-old child saying you're leaving home because you don't like school, you don't like the things you were involved, and the parents had absolutely no indication that this was going to happen. They simply woke up and their child is missing. And then within the coming hours, of course, you're reporting it to law enforcement. We had gotten involved, and you're realizing that your son or daughter was speaking to strangers online, and they basically convinced and groomed them into thinking there's a better life out there. Meanwhile, the friendship that was groomed and developed with this child is fake. These people were trying to manipulate their situation, whether they were vulnerable in school or maybe they were a little socially awkward, or even maybe there's some mental health issues or abuse going on at home. That's a typical scenario that we see every month, multiple times.
The situation you just described, is this child from a poor family, or what type of demographic this kid is from?
Yeah, well, there's really no particular demographic targeted. It's a crime of vulnerability and manipulation. The example I just gave you is from a very wealthy family. The child went to a private school, very smart, very good in school, active in athletics, and no indicators that he was unhappy. That's what happens when these kids are spending all this time online talking to strangers. And you got to remember, these conversations aren't a couple weeks sometimes. They're months. They're gaming with them, right? They're sharing information, what they like, what they don't like, what are the problems in their life or at home or in school. So these predators, they listen to that and then they take advantage and they create a narrative that they've experienced the same problems. So they form this connection or a bond especially with kids. And then they build this fake relationship on that. And sometimes these conversations go 2, 3, 4 months. So now the child, or even a young adult for that matter, feels a connection to these people. They feel like they're friends, right? Because they've been gaming with them. They've been talking on the chat, changing stories of what interests they might share. So they build this fake relationship, and then the predators start to, sometimes they'll use some of the information shared to leverage them. Sometimes there's photos exchanged, right, and videos. We've spoke to thousands of students, and we're identifying that these kids are all sharing explicit pictures of themselves. That's sort of a social normalization that's occurred over the past several years. Unbeknownst to the child or the young adult, these people aren't who they say they are. So then if they do that, now they have some type of leverage with, hey, if you don't give me more of this, I'm going to release it on social media. I'm going to release it to your school. I'm going to send it to your parents. So now the individual feels trapped, right? And they're really not sure what to do next. And typically it just multiplies until they really feel trapped and there's no way out.
Joe, what if a parent says, well, my child doesn't have any mental health issues. They seem confident. They just seem fine.
I would say that happens in a fair amount of the cases where the parents have no indicators. They think everything is fine. One of the problems is, now, you almost need two parents to work. to pay the things you're in. Things are more expensive, and there's careers now developed between both parents. So there's probably less interaction with the kids. Even if you try to stay involved with your children, kids have secrets. They do things without the parents knowing. It's been around forever, and the parents very much so might not see anything, but unbeknownst to them, there could be this sort of nefarious conversation going on online with people and really convincing this kid there's a better life out here. You don't have to answer to the rules, or there could be things going on with the child that the parents don't know. They could be bullied in school. We've even seen intergenerational abuse within the family where sometimes the parents had no idea what was going on because the child or the young individual is very scared to tell anybody. They're ashamed. They feel like they've made this horrific mistake, or sometimes it's not even a decision they made. It was just a flat-out assault on them by either a friend of the family or somebody else. You're not always going to see the indicators for sure. And the only way to narrow that percentage of something occurring is to be as active in your child's life as possible. Also monitor their social media. These kids are very smart. They really know their ins and outs of social media. So even if you're checking their phones, checking their devices, talking to them about the hazards of online communications, they're still out there in it because their friends are in it, right? Even if their phone doesn't have things that are alarming. When we go to speak to parents, we have a complete presentation on this. They're using their friends' phones. So, there's always a workaround with it, if they want to.
You mentioned 49 million people gets trafficked every year, and it's very and also it's very underreported in the news media. So, what do you think we as parents have to do to bring out that awareness and get the message across, not only to the parents, because as a parent I'm scared, and what can we better communicate that to our children to make sure they're also be aware of what's going on, not just have this natural rebellion and against the parents? Because I've experienced where my son blocked me from Instagram, blocked me from Facebook, and using other social media platforms I have never even heard of to communicate with other children.
Yeah, well, I think one of the first things a parent can do is contact us and get us in your schools. Like I said, we've talked to thousands of kids. Our education and awareness program has been really well received, and it's geared toward junior and senior high school students. And when we talk to them, it's only about an hour and a half. And we give them the presentation. We actually give them testimonials from children, what happened to them. They're a set of videos that have been professionally done, and they're real stories of how they were groomed or manipulated online or tricked, right? So it really shows them, hey, this isn't just a conversation. This is happening to kids and people just like you every single day. So if the parents can really, reach out to us and we can get into their school district, that's step one. Step two, most kids, they don't own their own phones. If you're the parent and you own the phone and the kids do what they, like you said, they block you, they'll try to manipulate you, you're going to have to sit down and have a conversation with them, a serious conversation. And you could even call us. We've met with kids one-on-one. Obviously, we don't have the resources to meet with thousands of kids one-on-one, but we can show them what's happened to these kids who have done that, who haven't listened to the messaging either from us or their parents on the dangers of this, because just taking their phone doesn't work. Because you take their phone, they're going to go get another one. We've had many cases where I think they were 16-year-olds, the 2 or 3 we've had recently, and the parents took the phone. Well, they just went out and bought another phone. I guess at 16 you can do that. They bought a burner phone at Walmart. So, but you really have to have that conversation, and you really have to be diligent in following up on them. I've had parents sort of push back a little bit, saying, well, it sounds like helicopter parenting. But after we speak with them and show them of kids who were groomed, who are still missing, who'd left, and they don't know where they are, they're being sold. We know that. They're moving around the country. They're very little communication with their parents, if any. And I think many, many times we can get law enforcement involved as well to talk with them, to share the experiences of what's happened. It's a battle. it's not a quick fix. It's not one conversation. It's a program that you really have to kind of develop and do some diligence. There's a lot of information online. So when you go talk with your kids, you can reference this. And hey, they know how to get online. Say, look at these links. I want you to read this stuff. It's sort of like an education separate from their education.
I'm a parent. I have 3 adult children, now 4 grandchildren. And my perspective, having gone through the full cycle of raising kids, is different than it was when my kids were high school, middle school age. I sort of had this bias that with my kids, I wanted to tell myself everything was okay, that they were they weren't going to have a problem. So when little things would pop up and I talked to them, there was sort of the tendency to just satisfy that concern, say everything's good, everything's fine. And if I were to go back now, I don't think I would be so quick to set those things aside. Have you seen that? I mean, do you see a similar thing?
Yeah, I can even relate to it as a parent as well. Our children are grown. We have grandchildren as well. I think it's, on the surface, you want your kids to be right. You want things to be going well for them. And even when they misstep, certain things are easier to be addressed than others. We didn't have that problem either with this online as prevalent as it is now. And I do see parents where, we've asked, we thought it was good, it's almost out of sight, out of mind. And it correlates with this topic. When we talk to parents, they listen. Very seldom do they get involved. Very seldom do they follow up questions with us. It's almost like that's not happening to my children because, on the surface, everything's looking great. Everything's fine. And I think they just shy away from it. And I can understand that. Thinking it'll fix himself. Maybe if I just touch on it a little bit, they'll understand. What I've realized, and I think you have too, is you have to have the tough conversations. You have to have a front, face-to-face meeting with them saying, listen, I know what's going on, and this is why you need to change your behavior. Because these people out there are not your friends. They are out there to manipulate you, to put you in harm's way, to make money any way they can. And of course you might get pushback because of like our kids. We don't know anything. I don't know how we survived all these years without their advice. But you're going to have to take that tough stance, and you're going to have to experience and tolerate some rebellion from your children if you want to really make an impact on them. And hopefully you break that ground with them, and they realize even as they get into their early teens and 20s, they look back and go, wow, I'm really glad you had that conversation with me because I really didn't see it when you were talking, but, now I do. Something will trigger, that conversation in their lives. When an incident happens or one of their friends, an incident happens, and it's hard. It's not easy. And but I tell you, it's much better than having to call us, 10 or 12 hours after your child is gone or missing, and finding out, everything seemed fine. And then you talk to their friends and they're like, well, one of our friends was talking to some older men or women online, and that's been going on for quite a while. And I do think I heard about them getting together because then it's a time factor. Now it's a time that we got to find them because the longer it goes, the more difficult it can be to locate them.
My perspective, human trafficking is different from what you know in reality. We see the media, we see the television shows. These people get trafficked, in my mind, thinking they come from broken families and they're being trafficked from the border or whatnot. That's what the TV media wants to tell us. But in reality, you're saying the demographic is wide and spread.
Sure. Yeah, I can tell you our cases are all of the above. We've had young adults missing and children missing from very wealthy families, very, I guess what you would say, safe communities, suburbs, rural areas. We've had young adults and kids from CYS services, from broken families and foster care families, and anywhere in between. Now, certainly the at-risk youth, the probability of them being exploited or manipulated into trafficking is higher, for sure, because they have more vulnerabilities, right? They've had no structure. They've had no mentor, no parent consistently to guide them through the things that occur in life, especially as a child growing up. I've spoke to one foster kid. He's been in 18 families in 5 years. I mean, and he had really no parents to speak of. I mean, they're still around, but they were drug addicts, and I think one of his parents was in jail. So they get bounced around a lot. So the predators know this, and they're constantly looking for these kids. I can tell you, without talking too much of how we do things, but the predators even know where the drop-off centers are for the kids across the country. They know where the foster kids or the CYS or the Family Youth Services facilities are until they can get them placed in a facility or another family, and they wait for them. They literally wait for them. So it's not a targeted demographic. Like I say, it's about vulnerability and manipulation. The border, we've had a little bit of experience down there, and there's probably close to 100,000 kids missing that have come across. They process them, and there's nowhere for them to go. They just go with families, at least who at least propose to be a family trying to take care of them. And I think there was even a report out now. They know a lot of them are in forced labor situations. Third-party vendors for big companies, either making parts or, they vendor, agriculture, manufacturing, services. We see a lot of them in the housekeeping services that get forced into that. So it's all the above. It really is. I mean, you really can't say one is worse than the other because it's just about identifying who's most susceptible that they can manipulate.
Joe, can you define grooming and sort of explain the process of how someone gets groomed and whether is it different for children versus adults, that sort of thing?
Sure. I can give you an example. Let's say for a young kid, under 18, we see a lot of this occurs from children from dysfunctional families, divorces, alcohol, domestic violence. So typically we've had they're online, they're on the chat rooms, they're doing all the things kids do. They're in the gaming apps. And then they certainly, as they're gaming, they have these sidebar conversations. And it's like, yeah, well, how's your night going? Terrible. My parents are fighting again. My dad's drunk. He beats my mom. Me and my brother want to get out of here, but, we just don't know what to do. But, we just kind of put it to the back of our heads and, push forward. Well, there's the first indicator on a predator. There's a vulnerability. So now, as time goes on, the predator might come up. Yeah, hey, I can understand that. I come from divorced parents. I'm 19. Meanwhile, they're 30 or 40 or 50. Because these profiles are all fake. So they start to bond with them, saying, "Yeah, I understand it. I had to leave home at 17 because it got so bad, and I got a job, and now things are really good." That's just a small piece of the grooming. The other piece is they try to find out personal information from them so they can leverage that as well. Like, let's say it's not a family issue. Let's just say it's bullying at school, or maybe it's drug use, or maybe they've shared photos. While this is all going on and they collect all this information, they know where their parents work. They know how many brothers and sisters they have. They know where they go to school if they're not at home. So they gather all this and they identify what is important to the person, what is important to this kid. And then when they're ready to leverage it, whether maybe they now got some video or explicit photo or something else that is very important to the child, they'll threaten them with it. If you don't do this, I'm going to hurt your mom and dad because now I know where you live. I know where your brothers are. I know where your sisters are. I know. So that's also something that they'll collect during this grooming process, right? And that's really what it is. It's I won't say it's gaslighting, but there's a piece of that too. They just keep hearing it over and over, and now they're on this side, and now they're stuck, right? They're stuck. If you don't do this, and I tell you, usually with the kids, it's photos and videos. They share these explicit videos and photos. That's the hook. Once they get them, they got them. And I can tell you from talking to thousands and thousands of students, it's probably 50% of the schools the students in the school are doing it. They either do it with their collective group of friends, or they're doing it with strangers online, or both. And then somehow those images get put out when they didn't even think, like it's a boyfriend girlfriend. They never thought their girlfriend would share their videos, but they broke up, and now she might have shared his videos all over the place. Somebody gets a hold of them. That's when the sextortion and extortion starts.